But I would like to recognize Bill Masters, retired, former general manager of Cone Mills Cliffside plant, and he was here in 1978 when the clock tower was originally dedicated. Bill?
Thank you, Phil. Joe Miller gave me the opportunity to come to Cliffside in 1971 as manager of the gray mill. Joe is living in Cary now and has dementia pretty bad. We all appreciate Joe and what he done here for Cliffside. He was here as general manager for several years. In working at Cliffside, Cone made the decision in 1973 to convert the Cliffside plant from terry fabrics to denim. This was a process of about 3 years, and in the meantime, a lot of the buildings were torn down. The memorial building, which housed the clock, was to be torn down, and Cone management made a decision to preserve the clock and build a tower on the Raleigh Rutherford Haynes home place here at Cliffside. Mr. Morris, who's Chief Executive Officer of Cone Mills at that time, came down for the dedication of the Raleigh Rutherford Haynes Tower and clock. That was December 19th, 1978. And what I could learn about Raleigh Rutherford Haynes, he was born over in Ferry in 1852. As a young man of 8 years old, his father passed away, and he assumed responsibility for the running of the farm. There were 8 children, and they did a great job with the farm. When Raleigh was 20 years old, he went to Union to learn how to grow cotton. He and his brother. They went 2 years to learn how to grow cotton, and he started growing cotton on their farm after that, in the whole area. Mr. Haynes built a gin on his place for the ginning of cotton, store, and other enterprises. In about 1880, the Cone brothers, Herman and Caesar, came through on wagons selling stuff. They were peddlers or drummers, as they were known in that day, and they struck up a good friendship with Mr. Raleigh Rutherford Haynes, which lasted over the years. Mr. Haynes built many mills: Florence, Avondale, Caroline, Henrietta, and his crown jewel was Cliffside, which he started in 1902 to produce denim gingham fabrics. In about 1929, I think the Japanese had taken over the gingham business, and Cliffside was converted to terry towels. The Cone brothers were the selling agents for the Cliffside plant from its inception until they bought the plant, I believe, in about 1947. Mr. Raleigh Rutherford Haynes was a great man, furnished jobs for a lot of people, and to think that the Civil War had beaten down the South and he helped the South to rise again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Masters. Talk a little bit about the clock restoration process here. We have Reno Bailey. You remember Cliffside.com. Put a face with a computer key. Reno.
Thanks, Bill. I'm going to give you a behind-the-scenes story in economics here about how to do all this. And I want to say that Raleigh Haynes lived right here. He stood on his front porch right here, and he'd look out over his town. And it said that he would give thought every day to what he could do to make his people more comfortable and to be accommodating to them. And he'd look for problems and then for ways to fix them. And that impulse of his still lives on in Cliffside's people. For several years, this clock had sat silent, or gave the wrong time, or chimed erratically. No doubt some people noticed, but figured someone in the county government, which owns this clock, would surely eventually come fix it, but no one ever did. One day in March of this year, out of the blue, I got this email from Mary Scruggs Beeson, who lives not far from here. And she said, "What do you know about the clock not working? And what does it take to get it working again?" I believe that most, if not all, of the Remember Cliffside readers would contribute to a fund to try to get it repaired. It seems such a sad fate for such a wonderful icon that has stood guard over us for all these years. Well, that's all it took, one person, to get this restoration ball rolling. In looking into the matter, we learned the clock had had its last overhaul 18 years ago in 1992. Then in 2003, 7 years ago, Cone Mills sold the clock to the county, and it hasn't had any expert attention since. Our society quickly decided to find and spend about $500 to have the clock inspected and to get an estimate on fixing it. The prognosis was not good. It needed a major restoration, which would cost about $7,000. We also became aware that in these lean times, the county commission is not eager to fund projects like this unless the community participates. In other words, cough up half the money. So our society agreed to pay half if the county would pay half. And so we started raising a fundraising drive that has raised so far a little over $15,000. All the contributors' names are listed on the back of your program. A third of the total we've raised was contributed by the Griffin Family Foundation. Betty Shull Griffin was the daughter of Eula May Haynes and Dr. Rush Shull, who was Cliffside's physician from 1910 to 1920. Betty was born in Cliffside in 1917, shortly after her grandfather Raleigh had died. Her family moved to Charlotte when she was 3, but she was able later to spend a lot of time here with her uncles and aunts, and she came to love Cliffside. Betty grew up in Charlotte, married Clarence A. Griffin Jr., and had 2 successful sons. Just weeks before she died at 93 this past June, Betty learned from her cousin Grover Haynes Jr. of our need for restoration funds, and she pitched in a big way. And she encouraged her children and grandchildren to do likewise, which they did. One of Betty's sons, Nick Griffin, is here with us today, and I'd like for him to say a few words.
Thank you, Reno. Reno's taken sort of the guts out of what I was going to say, because he gave you the history lesson of my family here. But my mother and her two brothers were all born in Cliffside, and had a lot of great memories of Cliffside, and came back on a regular basis to visit, particularly when they were younger. But one little vignette which I like about Raleigh Rutherford Haynes was, of course, back in those days it was customary for a man to approach the father of the bride and ask for her hand in marriage. And, that's what happened. My grandfather, Dr. Shull, fell in love with Eula May and approached her father and said, can I marry your daughter? And of course, Mr. Haynes, being an opportunistic businessman, said, sure you can, but Cliffside doesn't have a doctor, so if you're going to marry her, you got to agree to come be the doctor here. And he did for 10 years. They had a great time here, and I'd just like to thank everyone that was involved with this project. It's really fantastic, and we're all proud. Thank
you. The works of this rare and valuable 90-year-old antique are once again operating properly, but there's still more to do on the 4 clock faces, which we'll address in the coming months. We have the dollars to cover those expenses now, but we want to set up a substantial rainy day fund to cover the clock's maintenance for many years to come. As for maintenance cost of the tower itself, the roof, the woodwork, the grounds, the insurance, we're hoping to get an official commitment from the county to take care of those things. So we're still in the fundraising mode. If you haven't yet contributed to the fund, we can use your help. And if you're not a member of our society, we urge you to join. And so after this ceremony, we hope you'll amble right over to that table and make your contribution or join the society, if you would. Finally, a word of thanks to several who have worked hard to make this occasion more pleasant. On the hottest days this summer, they pressure washed everything in sight, erected the town map display, and mounted the plaque. In no particular order, they are James Harris, Eugene Cheetah Lipscomb, Philip White, Jim Roop, and Cecil Hauser. A big hand for the crew. And now here's the man who has restored our clock twice, the first time in 1992 and again this summer. He's not only a clock maker, but a clock historian and a member of our society, a man who loves this old clock. Here's Jim Van Orsdale.